BMW's second generation G22 era 4 Series Coupe is now much more its own model, with a distinctive look and a more sporting, dynamic feel. It's also a little bigger, a little faster and a little cleverer. For brand enthusiasts, there's plenty to like. BMW claims the differences with this second generation 4 Series Coupe are more than skin deep and will be equally evident in terms of drive dynamics. Well, we certainly found that during this test. For this G22 era model, much has changed over the 3 Series model it's based on, far more in fact than was the case with the previous version of this car. The chassis has been extensively tweaked and there's a wider rear track that gives this Mark II design a 21mm lower centre of gravity than its more conservative 3 Series showroom stablemate. And that's just the start. The body and the suspension mountings are stiffer, and on the standard suspension, this 4 rides 10mm lower than a 3. There are also firmer springs and anti-roll bars, plus this coupe also gets a freshly developed double-jointed spring strut front suspension and a 5-link rear axle. Otherwise, the basic winning Bavarian formula remains much the same. Rivals have long tried to copy the front-engine, rear-wheel drive BMW layout with its near-perfect 50-50 weight distribution, but they've never quite managed to deliver a package with the same kind of involving finesse. Super effective traction and stability control systems keep those back wheels in check, so if you're not a driving enthusiast, it'll all feel quite normal. But if you are, then the feeling of being propelled up the road by the back wheels as you exit a bend rarely fails to offer up a great feeling of pleasure. That's assuming you've got the rear-driven setup we're trying here, of course, and you haven't opted for the xDrive four-wheel drive system that the more powerful variants have to have. But even there, that keeps you rear-driven for most of the time. Upgraded 4-cylinder 2-litre engines from BMW's Efficient Dynamics family are used across the power plant range, and that kicks off for petrol people with the 184 horsepower 420i variant we're trying here. The same unit is also used in uprated 258 HP guys in the brawnier 330i. If you want 6 cylinders, you'll need the 374 horsepower engine of the rare and now mild hybrid embellished M440i xDrive variant. Plus, there's a full-fat M4 competition road burner, which for this generation of models gets xDrive and can now put out as much as 510 horsepower. The diesel lineup kicks off with the 190 horsepower 420D. That also gets the 48-volt mild hybrid tech, and it's available in rear-driven or xDrive forms. Plus, there's a couple of straight-six 3-litre 6-cylinder diesels, the 430D xDrive with 286 horsepower, and the M440D xDrive with 340 horsepower. An 8-speed ZF Auto gearbox is now mandatory with all the engines, and efficiency is class-leading. This rear-driven 420i Coupe is capable of up to 44.1 mpg on the WLTP combined cycle and up to 146 grams per kilometre of WLTP-rated CO2. Time to take a look inside, with cabin access possible via your smartphone if you've specified the digital key option and you have the right kind of handset. The doors, it turns out, are absolutely huge. They're the longest fitted to any BMW in current production. And once you take a seat up front, you'll find the cabin of this G22 generation coupe a good deal more sophisticated than that of the previous generation model. Some things are familiar though, the motorised belt butler that hands you your belt buckle as you get in, and the slightly lower driving stance that aims to differentiate this interior from that of a G20 era BMW 3 Series, positioning you unique and completely resculpted leather-stitched sports seats with contoured side bolsters. Everything's now a bit more canted towards the driver. The start button's been repositioned next to this restyled auto gear stick, and the steering wheel, that now befits the ambiance of the slightly larger and more luxurious sports coupe this car's become. It's the screens of the standard live cockpit professional package that you'll probably notice first though. A 12.3-inch monitor replacing the previous model's analog dials in the instrument cluster here, and a bigger centre dash iDrive infotainment display, which is now much better integrated into the centre of the fascia and 10.25 inches in size. There's some clever stuff incorporated into this setup, including the brand's connected package professional media setup and what BMW calls an intelligent personal assistant, which works a little bit like the Siri or Google Assistant systems that you might use on your smartphone, and which is there to answer questions that you can voice to the car as you drive it. Getting into the back isn't the easiest task in the world, but it is aided by these electrically operable, although rather slow, front seats. Once you are inside, you'll find the slightly strange combination of surprisingly decent legroom but slightly compromised headroom here. Still, assuming they're not sat behind a couple of basketball players or something, most adults will be fine back here on all but the longest trips. That's aided by the 41mm increase in wheelbase enjoyed by this G22 era design. Finally, let's take a look in the boot. Once open, it reveals a large but shallow space, now increased to 440 litres. If you need more room, a flexible 40-20-40 split folding rear backrest is provided as standard, and that's accessed via these rather hidden catches in the roof of the trunk area. Although the backrests don't fold completely flat, this allows longer items like skis to be slid forward into the cabin without disturbing two rear-seated folk. So, is this BMW 4 Series Coupe still the car in this class that does it all, the sector benchmark, the go-to choice in its segment? Well, if you're the kind of driving enthusiast that this model has traditionally appealed to, the answer is probably yes. Overall, there's a sustained level of excellence shot throughout this contender that Audi A5 and Mercedes C-Class coupe rivals still can't quite match. Can it be criticised? Well, it would have been nice if the significant price rise which accompanied the launch of this second generation G22 series model could have included adaptive M suspension, which we think you really need to think seriously about adding to the lower powered variants in order to combat the slightly firm ride. Plus, of course, we could talk about that divisive front grille, but that's a subjective call. What's not up for debate is that here BMW has built a benchmark contender in this class. That sounds rather clinical, doesn't it? So let's allow the Munich makers' marketing men to have the last word. This car, they say, is more than just a love letter to performance. Instead, it offers something deeper than that, the promise of a passionate affair.